America. I believe we're on our 31 episode. I'll wait a minute for folks to get rolling in. I'll check the Facebook and see if it's live. Usually what happens whenever I have a holiday weekend, everyone gets a day off. My usual schedule is I get home Friday evening and I leave out Sunday afternoon. I get one day off a week on Saturday. And when folks get Monday off, like on a Monday holiday, I usually get my entire Sunday off, but still have to leave out during that holiday on that Monday. So I had a quick ride up from my home in North Carolina. I'm sitting somewhere in a rest stop near D.C. Continue to deliver this in the morning. I don't have a lot prepared. I quickly ran out of the house trying to get to work. I kind of had a good evening Saturday. Camera's doing funny stuff. It's focusing weird now. I can easily reset the camera. Lower resolution, back to higher resolution. There it goes. To deal with whatever issues I was having with the camera. Shout out to Rig on YouTube. And thank you for joining us, Dickie Beard, Devin Watson on Facebook. Anybody watching this, want me to give you a shout out? Tell me where you're from. Tell me what's going on with you. Tell me the conditions you're facing as a worker. It's growing. Many people are unemployed now. I just wanted to make a quick few statements. I think there's a lot of confusion politically of why there's a massive unemployment crisis. This report is high. The real unemployment numbers as high as half of American workers are unemployed. And you talk to the Democrats, they like to blame it on Trump. If you talk to Republicans, they say it's the Democrats. And they're both right. In a sense, it's the ruling class. It's capitalism. It's the crisis of overproduction. Every 6 to 10 years or so, the capitalist system crashes like clockwork. And there's certain institutional entities like the Federal Reserve and others to manage that. And the government often does bailouts that bail out the rich, not the working class. They bailed out the rich in 2008. This recent bailout, which they were ready to do in a moment's notice to save the large-scale corporations and banksters, was one of the largest transfers of wealth in history. The billionaires, the Jeff Bezoses, they've got billions. They made billions and billions of dollars, and large number of small businesses went out of business. Huge number of unemployed people. Lots of people lost their health insurance. So the Democrats' claim is that Trump didn't handle the COVID situation effectively, which is true. But a lot of it has to do, I don't think it would have, even if the Democrats are saying, oh, it actually exists, and Trump didn't even recognize its existence. The fact of the matter is, one of the major problems that Trump did was, I think there was a cheap test they could have got from the European Union or Germany specifically, and if they bought that, if the government would have took action, worked on the people's behalf, bought them in large quantities, and then had made that test available, it would have really helped, with the COVID preparation. But the test had to be made by an American company. This is the pharmaceutical industry. This is big pharma. Big pharma would have existed whether it was a Democrat or Republican in office. Okay. So COVID would have wreaked havoc on this system, this capitalist system, where the working people have little to no power, and the large-scale big pharma, oil companies, banking class run the economy. So COVID really showed the emperor had no clothes. COVID showed the inefficiencies, the ineffectiveness of the capitalist system and the heart of the capitalist imperialist system, the United States. Countries like Vietnam, China, um, used the government of action they had, which the power of the government working on behalf of the people, in half of even the nation's interests are the large economy's interests, were able to shut down the countries, keep people safe, save lives. We do not even have the infrastructure to do that in this country. It's the Wild West. It's these few monopoly banking cartels and corporations that run in complete anarchy for their interests. They can have complete and utter control over the government. Have any change over that? We need to build workers' power. To build a government that can rival the power, have control over a government that can rival the power of the corporations that will work within our interest. That's not gonna happen in an election cycle. That's going to take decades of long, protracted community and labor-based organizing. Okay, so, and to be honest, COVID is what triggered the economic conditions and the economic problems we're having. But ultimately, the economy was ready to collapse anyways. A lot of what Trump did was particularly horrible. With a lot of the tax cuts that were put into law by Republicans largely, somewhat supported by the Democrats. A lot of what was done with that is companies just bought their own stocks. Companies bought their own stocks, inflated the stock market. So Trump was like, oh, it's the best economy. Trump was repeatedly saying, this is the best economy we've ever had. Complete and utter lie. And it was shallow and doomed to fail and ready to collapse. It was, anything could have triggered the economic collapse. It was bound to happen regardless of COVID or not. And it was actually a really good study today. I actually interviewed Saturday Matt Cedillo on the Chicano moratorium, which was Saturday before last, 50th anniversary. Beautiful showing and organizing in LA. If people want to look at that interview I did with Matt Cedillo also asked me to archive a few of his interviews. I have a few of those up on my YouTube. If you're watching this on Facebook, please subscribe to my YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and search Dust James, Anti-Imperialist America, my channel will come up. If you're watching this on YouTube and if you have not liked my public page, Dust James, Anti-Imperialist America, go to my Facebook and like it. I can kind of talk back and forth, and I can refer to links. If people are both on my Facebook and my YouTube, there's stuff on my YouTube that's not on my Facebook, and there's stuff I share on my Facebook that I have no way of putting on my YouTube. So if you're on the YouTube, go to my Facebook, Dust James, Anti-Imperialist America. If you're on my Facebook, go to my YouTube, Dust James, Anti-Imperialist America. So the economy was ready to collapse because of the continued crisis of overproduction, which is getting worse and worse with the growing technology, with the microchip economic revolution. Essentially, they're needing less and less and less workers. There's always been a reserve pool of labor. You have a certain amount of the population. They say it's at least 5%. That's that on the books, but closer probably to 10, 15%, even the best of time. And that is almost like a billy club to keep wages down. They have surplus labor that used to keep wages down, keep people in a state of poverty. Well, if you quit your job, you're going to be this poor. You're going to be unemployed. You're going to join the masses of unemployed people. Population of homelessness. This is designed to keep wages down, even in the best economic times. And now with the collapse, the crash in the economy, masses of unemployment. So what was a normal feature of capitalism? To keep wages down, the army of reserve labor is now growing and growing because less need of labor because of the advancements in technology. I mean, that's pretty much the situation we're facing. If people want to get on, I got about 2 more news stories I wanted to share. People want to get in the comments, ask any questions, make this a little bit longer. I won't go too far. The first news story they wanted to share that happened over the last week was this. There was news. So I watched them. Watch Democracy Now almost on the daily, and every day I hear Democracy Now. I learn more about the world. I understand that Democracy Now is an imperialist news source. They call the War and Peace Report, but they blatantly repeat CIA propaganda against rival countries on the daily. And there's no exception to this. Just recently, Democracy Now! That claimed that Russia poisoned a dissident that had a relationship with Germany right before they're about to complete production of a major gas pipeline. Now, this major gas pipeline, the United States has been trying to convince Germany to import natural gas all the way from the United States because Russia is somehow bad. Even though it's right next to them, it makes way more economic sense to buy natural gas from Russia, their neighbor. The U.S. has been trying to convince Germany to buy natural gas from the United States. This is long going on process. And just before the completion of the pipeline, they are saying, it is being said that Russia poisoned the dissidents that had a relationship with Germany. This is an absolute and utter lie. And it was supposedly a poison that was developed into the Soviet Union, so only Russia would want to have it. I'm not sure what exactly happened. There's no ties to Russia that it happened. And Margaret Kimberly of the Black Agenda Report, one of the voices of truth in the belly of the beast, Black Agenda Report. Margaret Kimberly came out saying she doesn't believe it one bit. And that's so if for socialists or anybody, if you're looking for a news source, you cannot always believe Democracy Now! They're part of the bourgeoisie. They're part of the imperialist. They're part of the American exceptionalism. Just today, I noticed it's almost like they're part of the sheepdog camp to get liberal-minded folks who have good intentions and ideas and thoughts and twist them in supporting humanity's greatest enemy, U.S. imperialism. Like today, they had a debate between a more pro-Biden force and Cornel West. Cornel West, usually a positive figure, is backing Biden. He's saying it's a vote against fascism. But in all reality, I mean, I've documented over and over again how that claim does not stand up. And there's tons of forces who don't take that position. Chris Hedges, Black Agenda Report, one of my trusted sources, does not take the position. And Democracy Now! Is not interested in interviewing those forces. Democracy Now! Featured Cornel West and Angela Davis today on their program. Two forces that have done positive work, speak positive game, but are ultimately backing one of the proponents of imperialism, instead of trying to build power outside of the system and build power outside of it. So I got a question here. Left Social Nationalism 9. Okay. What do you think? Who do you think will win the election? Not that it'll matter. I am thoroughly convinced that Donald Trump will win the election. And the reason why I'm thoroughly convinced of that is, first of all, we do not live in a democratic system. This is a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. There's something called the Electoral College, which is vote disenfranchisement on a mass scale. Vote mass disenfranchisement on a mass scale. Basically, if you don't live in a swing state, your vote does not count whatsoever. If they know that those number of votes are going to the Democrats, they know that those votes are going to Republicans. You live in California, firmly Democratic. If you live in, I'm not sure what, or Georgia, that might have been a swing state. Like Alabama, I think is definitely for the Republicans. But if you live in one of those states, it's not a swing state. Your vote basically has no say on the election. That's one of the reasons. And a lot of the swing states aren't doing very. I don't know. It's interesting the way Trump has framed it. He's been able to blame the Democrats trying to push for the needed shutdown of the economy on the economy collapsing, when it was partly because of his economic policies that helped bring along a crash. So they're able to blame it on each other. And he's kind of developed a cult personality, especially in rural areas. And a lot of those states are the ones that decide the election. So it's Labor Day. Hope everyone had a good Labor Day today. Hope everyone had nice time off with their family. Maybe folks having barbecue. Maybe folks just getting together. Starting to be fall, a little bit cooler. You can actually go outside. Some tons of people, out in the park and stuff. Things are starting to get back to normal. More businesses are opening. But there's this long presence of mass unemployment, and it's not going back. There is no reversing history. This is the development of technology. This is the progression of history. The U.S., we are in a decaying empire that is lashing out, is becoming more undemocratic, regardless if it's a Republican or a Democrat. As this cabal of oil and banking giants loses its global dominance, as Russia and China, who are using nationalized industries and are using planning, which is a superior system, and the chaos of neoliberalism that has destroyed the world, that has kept people in poverty. Looks like we have a question. Do you think virtual learning should be mandatory? That's interesting. So they make school mandatory. Now, should they make school mandatory? I like the idea that school is free and school should be funded, but should it be mandatory? Should school at all be mandatory? And then you got particular problems when it comes to distance learning. You have those who don't have internet connection at home, are disenfranchised. Poor black and brown folks are less likely to have a good internet connection. They're less likely to have as good of a computer. So a lot of this virtual learning is helping to replicate continue racial and class disparities. And as more money is being pumped into the infrastructure for virtual learning, this site that I'm using right now, before COVID, not a lot of people were streaming or doing as many Zoom meetings, and a lot of money is being pumped into this infrastructure. And these are permanent infrastructure changes. That means virtual learning is going to be a major part of education to continue. There is no going back from this change of infrastructure to virtual learning. And also with the work environments, more people are going to be working from home. Companies are going to use these new infrastructure to maximize their profits. It's also part of the austerity. The local governments want to give tax breaks to their friends and their donors. So they're going to take money out of education and try to cut down that budget. So they continue to not. This is the continued austerity, a defunding of resources. So now they have the ability to not spend as much money on education. I could see teachers being fired. I could see a general downgrade in the level of education that our children are going to be receiving. This is a permanent infrastructure switch, change. This is a restructuring of the entire educational system. This is a restructuring of the social means of production in general that is going to be more digitalized. The way I'm talking to you now, is going to become the new norm. It's cheaper that way, and that's just how people are going to go about it. Let's see. I have a few more comments on Facebook. Eon Miller: self-investment has allowed other nations to excel, whereas we only invest in billionaires. Education should be a lifelong experience. That's 100% correct. Eon Miller. So the reason why our society and the United States is falling apart, why the roads are crumbling, why infrastructure is crumbling, why there's less and less industrial jobs, why the social services, like in Oregon, they're using a computer system from the 80s for their unemployment service. The reason why is because we have allowed the government, completely in control by the rich, these monopolies, to disinvest and destroy the country and destroy the government. So they reign absolutely supreme. And other countries like China, even Russia to extent, has forced a part of the production, or forced, either controls part of the means of production or has enough power to control these corporations, or at least tax enough to be able to take money and invest it back in infrastructure and to make sure the country builds and to make sure it grows. China has grown 3 times that of the United States for the last 30 years. And they've done that because the government has enough power to mandate the companies do what is in the interest of the overall economy. And the United States, these billionaires have been able to rob and destroy the economy blind. And we're sitting in the ashes. And we are dealing with the consequences. Steve Holder, thank you. Thank you for participating. Welcome to the COVID-19 apocalypse. Right? Well, I was just getting early on that COVID-19, the economy would have collapsed either way, regardless of COVID-19. This is the crisis of overproduction. Overproduction is where technology makes it worse, but even in normal capitalism, they're always trying to make a profit. So they produce goods, as many goods as possible, and then they have to sell them back to the worker. But we can never buy back all those goods because they need to make a profit. Therefore, there's too many goods. There's been too much produced. There's too much produced they can't sell, and then they destroy those items. Like in the 1930s, and even now, they destroy dairy. They destroy food while people are starving because they can't make a profit. Because the system runs for profit and not people. We need to reverse this change. We need to build workers' power. Build workers' power through community, union and labor organizations, to be able to create a government or mandate that the government work within our interest. We need a government of action to work, of action to fight for working families, as Caleb Maupin says, which I 100% agree. The government has to be able to control the corporations, has to be able to bake up trust, has to nationalize different sectors, and run the economy for the interest of the people to build the economy, or the economy is going to collapse, and which is done time and time again. And these short-sighted, egotistical corporations that have no concern for anyone, their only thing is their bottom line, their stockholders. That is the result. Is everything crumbling around us? Rig, do you think? Okay, Carla Hernandez. My mom's doctor wanted to use the internet for her appointment. That's another example. The medical industry. This investment and this building up of digital infrastructure is a permanent. Is permanent. There's no going back. There'll be doctor's visits online. School's going to be online. Work's going to be online. Carla Hernandez, a safe job is post office, and it's interesting you mentioned the post office. There's been an attack on the post office, and it's been going on since the 70s. This isn't new under Trump. I've said it over and over since so in the 70s they were able to unionize, and because there was already a tax and they were trying to lower wages, they were unionized and they get good wages. But there's been a sabotage of the post office since the 70s. First they sold off airplanes, then they sold off trucks. Now almost all the post office trucks are private contractors. It always wasn't that way. It used to be better paying. And controlled by the post office directly with better benefits. And then 2006, there was a complete bill of sabotage that was almost unanimously passed by the Democrats, which forced the post office to pay their retirement 75 years in advance. People didn't even exist yet, had a retirement plans being paid into, were forced to. And if it wasn't for this bill, the post office would have been making a profit the whole time. The post office is extremely efficient and a amazing resource for the American people, and is being attacked and sabotaged by the privatizers to steal universal service. Universal service where you can pay 40, 50 cents and send mail to Alaska from Florida will be something of the past if we allow them to privatize our post office. And the post office is a great job, 20, 30 bucks an hour, good health care, retirement. And if they're able to privatize it, all those $20, $30 an hour jobs that are in rural towns across America are going to become $10 jobs. and they're going to become de-skilled jobs. It won't run nearly as efficient or as professional as it does today if it is allowed to be privatized. Essentially, the post office works for the benefit of the people. And then the second you put private hands on it, just tons and tons of that money is just sifted out of it and goes to Wall Street and goes to the rich, is taken out of our economies, taken out of the hands of working people, and further crystallizes and centralizes power and wealth. Carla Hernandez, post office wants to get into to banking payday loans. I think we should nationalize the banks. Part of what the reason why we have an empire, why we have all these wars, is a lot of the hands of economic control is placed into finance capital. And these finance capitals, these banks, invest in the prison industrial complex. They invest in the military industrial complex. Um, these banks invest overseas, and they with high interest and horrible loans. They keep people in poverty. They're heavily tied in with the oil companies, and the U.S. military has destroyed any and all competing oil producers. This is why they destroyed Libya. This is why they destroyed Syria. So if we want a better society, we have to break the power of the banking structure. And a good way to do that is to privatize the bank, publicize the banks. And we already have the infrastructure of the post office. So we could run the post office. Community banks run out of the post office. And these banks that are from and of the community can invest in things that they know will they have a good return on, so they will be solvent. And they can invest in things that actually help the community. They're not going to invest in strip clubs, and they're not going to, they're not going to invest in things that don't pay high wages. They're not going to invest in environmentally damaging products. They're going to invest in things that grow business in those communities for the benefit of that community. These would be community-controlled banking. Community-controlled banking is absolutely what is necessary to avoid the crisis, to end these wars, and to change power in the hands of the people. What does FedEx pay? That's interesting. So the post office having such a strong union, and then the Teamsters with United States U.S. Postal, United Postal Service, UPS private company, also has a union. So the fact that the United States Postal Service has such a big union raises wages throughout the industry. Now, and the Teamsters went on strike in the 90s, and that helped keep things good as well. But the very fact that the for-profit system has to give money to its shareholders makes that company pay less wages. And it's an incentive for those companies to make a profit. They try to pay as less wages as possible. The public post office, which doesn't need to make a profit, is there to serve the American people, is able to pay those high wages. And if you get rid of the post office and completely privatize it, it will lower the wages of FedEx and UPS. I actually was offered from UPS. I was offered from FedEx. I've been offered jobs to drive for FedEx. I asked them, are they union? They said no, but we get all the union contracts, but we have all the union benefits because of other people in that industry. So if there's a union in the industry, that raises wages in the entire industry. This goes into the concept of solidarity, working class solidarity. Injury to one is an injury to all. A victory for any working person Raising of wages for any working person is a raising of wages for the entire labor market. Okay, let's go further in the contents. Caroline Rayner, respected educator. Education is supposed to be the equalizer, but the brown and the Latinos are not getting quality education. Therefore, it is not, and there will not be any equalizer whatever. The entire system of education in this country is designed to perpetuate class and racial oppression. The idea that education is based off of your zip code or your neighborhood or where you live, a tiered educational system. You live in a bad neighborhood, you go to a bad school. The local tax base makes the education. This system alone um, perpetuates race and class oppression. We need to have equally federally funded per student capita on a federal basis. We need to eliminate the tax-based funding of education. There should be equal funding per child on a federal basis across the entire United States. And that would help to get rid of the classist, racist, disproportionate quality of education. Joe Hartness, fellow driver, also classless society, incoming. And there's something to be said about that. These larger corporations like Amazon, they want to they want as much information as possible, so they can control that information, use it, and make as much money as possible. If you go to your local flea market and buy stuff and they don't know about that transaction, that's less money they have. So it is in the interest of Amazon and other these large corporations to keep everything on a card basis. So this coin shortage, just like the bailouts, seem to help these billionaires that control the government. Caroline Rayner. Yes, COVID had opened the door for this new virtual world, which the brown and Latinos will be left out of. Caroline Rayner. Privatization is destruction for the hard working people. That is 100%. Carla Hernandez. Do you think our money is safe in the bank? And what are your thoughts on silver and gold? I paid $40 in California taxes on a gold coin. This is interesting. I'm not gonna odds. It's hard to tell. If there's times of inflation, as the money, well, if the I think your money is good in the bank. Like there's FDIC backing it up. But if there's hyperinflation, which comes with a crashing economy, gold and silver are actually very popular right now because of that very reason. But this usually only concerns a small portion of the population. Even before COVID, 80% of American workers lived paycheck to paycheck. I mean, that's insane. We have no deep-seated economic power. We're completely at the behest and the will of the super rich and the large-scale corporations. And even these small businesses or people with savings or some property aren't that safe. Like these growing these growing billionaires and crystallized economic power in the hands of a few are making it abundantly clear that something has to give, something has to change. Working people need to come together, rise up and demand power and control over our lives. Steve Holder. Yes, the cashless society is coming within next year. I'm not sure about that. That's an interesting. Um, that's an interesting guess. Um, I think that's enough for tonight. Unless anybody wants to ask any more questions, go ahead and end it. All right. Thank you, everyone. And remember, all power to the people.